Danny Cole had forgotten what his own face looked like. 3 years had passed since they locked the mask onto him, and in that time he had become something less than human. The metal covered everything from his forehead to his chin, seamless and dark, cold against his skin even after all this time. It had no eyes, no mouth, no features at all, just smooth black metal that made him look like a machine instead of a man. He worked in the deep tunnels of Mining Station Kappa 7, an asteroid base floating in the cold emptiness between Mars and Jupiter. The consortium owned this place and everything in it, including the humans who dug precious minerals from the rock. Danny was one of 43 masked workers on the station. They were the troublemakers, the ones who had spoken too loud or fought too hard. The masks were their punishment and their prison. Every morning Danny woke in his sleeping pod, a space barely large enough for his body. A tube connected to a port in the mask delivered a thick paste that kept him alive but gave him no pleasure. He could not taste it. He could not taste anything. The mask filtered every sensation, dulling the world until it felt like a dream he could not wake from. He walked to the tunnels with the other workers. Nobody spoke to him. The masked ones did not speak at all because the masks had sealed their mouths shut. They communicated through gestures when necessary, but mostly they just worked in silence. The other miners, the ones without masks, looked away when Danny passed. He had become something uncomfortable to witness, a reminder of what happened to those who caused problems. The tunnels were hot and dark. Danny operated a drilling machine for 16 hours each day, breaking apart rock to find the rare metals they needed for their technology. His body ached constantly, but the mask dulled that too. It dulled everything. Pain, joy, anger, hope. The device monitored his thoughts through neural connections that had grown into his brain over the years. When he felt something too strongly, when an emotion threatened to rise up, the mask sent a pulse that flattened it back down. He had learned to think in fragments. Complete thoughts were dangerous because the mask could read them. If he thought about rebellion, about fighting back, about freedom, the punishment came swift and terrible. Electric fire through his nerves, his muscles locking up, his body falling to the ground while the other workers stepped around him. So Danny had trained himself to never finish a thought. He would start to imagine escape and then think about rock formations instead. He would begin to feel anger and then count the drips of water falling from a pipe. 3 years of this had worn him down to almost nothing. He did not remember his mother's face anymore. He did not remember the color of the sky on Earth. He barely remembered his own name. Danny Cole was just a label now, data in the consortium's files. The person who had once carried that name felt very far away. But something in him refused to die completely. Some small spark hidden so deep that even the mask could not find it. He saw it in the little things he still did without understanding why. When he passed a viewport, he would pause for just a moment to look at the stars. When another masked worker fell from exhaustion, Danny would help them stand even though the mask shocked him for unauthorized movement. When he found a smooth stone in the rubble, he would slip it into his pocket and carry it with him, a tiny secret the machines did not know about. The overseers watched them constantly. Tall creatures with scaled skin and shades of green and blue, they moved through the station like lords surveying their property. Their eyes were large and golden, and they looked at humans the way humans might look at insects, useful for certain tasks but not worthy of real consideration. Danny had stopped hatting them because hatred was an emotion and emotions brought pain. He simply existed in their presence like furniture exists in a room. One day, during the shift change when workers moved between the tunnels and their pods, Danny noticed something unusual. A new had arrived on the station. He could tell she was new because he knew all the overseers by their patterns of movement, and this one moved differently. She walked slower, her head lower, her tail dragging slightly behind her instead of held high with pride. And there was something else, marks on her scales, burns arranged in a pattern that Danny did not recognize but understood instinctively as something shameful. The other stepped aside when she passed, not out of respect but out of disgust. She was marked. She was wrong somehow. She was like him. The new arrival stopped near the viewport where Danny had paused. For a long moment they stood together, human and alien, both outcasts in their own way. Danny expected her to look away like everyone else did. He expected disgust or fear or indifference. Instead, she looked at him, really looked at him. Her golden eyes studied the mask and then seemed to search for something beyond it. Danny felt a strange sensation he had not experienced in years. It took him a moment to recognize it as curiosity. The mask detected elevated emotional activity and sent a warning pulse through his nerves. Danny forced himself to think about nothing, to become empty, to feel nothing at all. The moment passed. The moved on. Danny returned to his pod for his 6 hours of sleep. But that night in the darkness of his pod, Danny allowed himself half a thought. Just half, not enough to trigger punishment. Someone had looked at him. Someone had seen him, not the mask, him. He fell asleep holding the smooth stone in his hand, and for the first time in 3 years he dreamed. The dream was simple. He dreamed of his own face, the one he had forgotten, and in the dream he was smiling. When he woke, the dream was gone and the mask was cold against his skin, and the tunnels waited for him just like every other day. But something had changed. Something very small had cracked open inside his chest. Danny did not know the name of the who had looked at him. He did not know why she carried those marks of shame. He did not know that she had once designed the very technology that imprisoned him. He did not know that she had come to this forgotten station seeking redemption for crimes she could not forgive herself for. He knew none of these things. All he knew was that for one moment someone had seen him as human. And that was enough to keep the small spark alive for one more day. Had been brilliant once. She had been respected, celebrated, wealthy beyond measure by standards. Her work in biotechnology had earned her a place among the elite scientists of the consortium, and she had believed every word they told her about the lesser species of the galaxy. Humans were barely sentient, they said. Humans felt pain only in the way animals felt pain, without true understanding or suffering. Humans needed to be controlled for their own good, guided by their betters, put to work in ways that served the greater civilization. Had accepted this as truth because it was easier than questioning it. She had helped design the neural compliance masks, not the current version but the early prototypes. She had solved the problem of emotional suppression, finding the pathways in the human brain that carried feelings and learning how to quiet them. She had considered it a mercy at the time. If humans could not feel as deeply, they would not suffer as much. That was what she told herself. Then she had visited a mining colony to observe her technology in action. She had watched a masked human stumble and fall. She had watched him lie there, waiting for help that did not come. And she had watched him die alone on that cold floor while other masked workers stepped around him, their own emotions too dulled to feel compassion. Something broke inside that day. She began to research. She began to ask questions. She began to see humans as they truly were, not as the consortium described them. She learned about their art and music, their history and dreams, their capacity for love and sacrifice. She learned that they felt everything as deeply as any, perhaps more deeply. She tried to change things from within. She wrote reports about the cruelty of the compliance system. She proposed reforms that would treat human workers with basic dignity. She spoke at meetings and sent messages to leaders and begged anyone who would listen. Nobody listened. Worse than that, they turned on her. She was declared a traitor to her species, a sympathizer with lesser beings, a threat to the natural order. The burns on her scales were made in a public ceremony while thousands watched. They stripped her of her rank and her wealth, and her name was not even her real name anymore. It was a designation for the disgraced, meaning roughly one who walks in shame. They sent her to Mining Station Kappa 7, the most remote and forgotten outpost in the consortium's territory. She was assigned to maintenance work, cleaning filters and repairing minor equipment, work far beneath her abilities, work designed to humiliate her until she died of old age or despair. but did not despair. She watched. She studied. She looked for a way to make things right, even if only in some small way. That was when she noticed Danny Cole. He was different from the other masked workers. She could not explain how she knew this at first. They all looked the same with those featureless metal faces. They all moved the same way, slow and empty, like puppets with their strings cut. But Danny paused at viewports. Danny helped others when they fell. Danny moved with a heaviness that suggested something still lived inside him, pressing against the walls of his prison. Began to watch him specifically. She learned his schedule, his routes through the station, his work assignment. She positioned herself in places where she could observe without being obvious. The other ignored her anyway. She was beneath their notice now. She saw him collect small stones and hide them in his pockets. She saw him trace patterns on dusty surfaces when he thought no one was looking. She saw his hands shake sometimes, fighting against the mask's control, his body trying to express something his mind was not allowed to feel. This human was still in there, still fighting. After 3 years of imprisonment, something in him had not surrendered. One day took a risk. She walked past Danny's work area and dropped a small piece of metal on the ground. Just a scrap, nothing that would raise suspicion. But she had bent it into a shape, a simple symbol that meant hope in the old language. She did not know if he would understand it. She did not know if he would even notice it. The next day she found a pattern of scratches on a pipe near where she worked. 3 lines crossed by 2 lines. It meant nothing in any language she knew, but it meant something to him. It was a response. It was communication. They began to exchange messages this way. Scratches and arrangements of stones and small objects left in hidden places taught him some symbols. He taught her human marks that she did not recognize but came to understand through context. Danger, sadness, question, friend. Friend, he called her friend. The mask must have detected something because Danny's movements became stiffer, more controlled. He was being punished for elevated emotional activity, but he kept leaving messages anyway. He kept reaching out despite the pain it cost him. Made her decision. She would remove his mask. She had the technical knowledge. She had access to maintenance equipment that could be modified. She had studied the newer models of compliance devices and understood their weaknesses. It would be dangerous. It might be impossible. If they were caught, they would both be executed. She did not care. This one human had shown more courage in his silent messages than she had shown in her entire life of comfort and privilege. He deserved to be free. He deserved to feel the air on his face and speak with his own voice and cry if he needed to cry. She left him a final message, more complex than the others. A meeting place, a time, a warning of danger, a promise to try. She did not know if he understood all of it. She only knew that she had to try. That night, lying in her small quarters, thought about what she was risking. Her life meant little to her now. She had already lost everything that mattered. But if she failed, Danny would lose his only chance. She thought about the humans she had helped imprison with her technology. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, trapped inside metal cages bolted to their skulls. She could not save them all. She might not even save this one. But she had to try. For Danny, for herself, for every human who had suffered because she had once believed the lies her people told. Closed her eyes and waited for the time to come. Worked in the maintenance bay during the night cycle, gathering what she needed piece by piece. A neural probe from a broken scanner, a power cell from discarded equipment, thin wires meant for circuit repair, a cutting tool designed for delicate work. Each item was small and unremarkable on its own. Together, they formed the beginning of hope. She had studied the current generation of compliance masks through maintenance records and technical documents she was not supposed to access. The new models were more advanced than the ones she had helped create years ago. They did not just sit on the face anymore. They grew into it. Tiny filaments extended from the metal into the skin, the muscles, the nerves. They wrapped around the speech centers of the brain and the emotional processing regions. They became part of the person wearing them. Removing such a device was not like taking off a helmet. It was like surgery. Dangerous surgery performed with improvised tools by someone who was not a doctor. Understood she might kill Danny in the attempt. She also understood that he had already asked her to try, through his scratched messages in the dust. He would rather die free than live another year as a prisoner in his own body. She had to respect that choice even as it terrified her. The meeting place was an old tunnel in the lower sections of the station, abandoned years ago when that mineral vein ran dry. Nobody went there anymore. The cameras had been removed and repurposed elsewhere. It was as close to private as anywhere on Kappa 7. Danny arrived first. He stood in the darkness waiting, his metal face reflecting the faint glow of emergency lights. When entered the tunnel, he turned toward her. She could not read his expression because he had no expression to read, but his body language spoke of tension, fear, and something else: anticipation. She spoke to him in low tones, keeping her voice soft in case sound carried through the old ducts. She explained who she was. She explained what she had done, the technology she had helped create, the guilt that had driven her to this place. She told him she wanted to remove his mask but that it might kill him. She told him he could refuse and she would understand. Danny raised one hand and pointed at his face. Then he made a gesture she had taught him, the symbol for freedom. Nodded, she understood. She began to work. The first step was disconnecting the external power supply. The mask drew energy from a small cell embedded at the base of the skull. She had to cut into the skin there just a little to reach the connection. Danny flinched when the blade touched him but held still. He could not feel much through the mask's dulling effect, but some sensations got through. Pain was one of them. Blood ran down the back of his neck as she worked. The power cell came free with a soft click. The mask shuddered once and then went dark. Its displays and monitoring systems shut down. For the first time in 3 years, nobody was watching Danny's thoughts. But the mask did not release. The filament still held it in place, threaded through his flesh and wrapped around his nerves. Had to remove them one by one. Danny began to shake. Without the emotional suppression running, his body started to feel everything it had been. 3 years of trapped feelings came flooding back in waves. Fear and anger and grief and loneliness crashed through him like storms over an ocean. His hands clenched into fists and his breathing grew ragged. Worked faster. Each filament she disconnected brought another wave of sensation. Danny's body jerked and spasmed as nerves that had been numbed for years suddenly came alive. He fell to his knees but did not signal her to stop. He never signaled her to stop. She found the connections to his speech centers and began the delicate process of separating them. This was the most dangerous part. One wrong move could leave him unable to speak forever. One wrong move could stop his heart. Danny stopped breathing. His body went rigid, every muscle locked in place. Felt panic rise in her chest. She pressed her hands against him and felt for a heartbeat. Nothing. She struck his chest with her fist hard, the way she had read about in human medical texts. Nothing. She struck again. Once, twice, 3 times. Danny gasped and his heart stuttered back to life. His breathing returned, shallow but present. Allowed herself one moment of relief before continuing her work. Meanwhile, in the station's control center, Director was reviewing anomalies. He was the highest ranking on Kappa 7, a career administrator who had been assigned to this remote post as punishment for minor political failures. He ran the station with cold efficiency and little interest in the lives of those beneath him. The anomalies had caught his attention. One of the maintenance workers, the disgraced scientist, had been accessing technical files she should not care about. Her movement patterns had become irregular. And now, one of the masked workers showed strange biometric readings. Elevated stress, then sudden flatline, then irregular heartbeat. Sent a security team to investigate. He did not expect to find anything important. He expected to find a worker having a medical episode or perhaps a minor equipment malfunction. But procedure required investigation and always followed procedure. In the abandoned tunnel, pulled the last filament free. The mask was loose now, held in place only by the scar tissue that had grown around its edges over 3 years. She gripped it carefully and began to lift. The metal separated from Danny's face with a sound like tearing fabric. Skin came with it in places, leaving raw wounds that bled freely. Danny screamed, the first sound he had made with his own voice in 3 years. The scream echoed through the tunnel, raw and terrible and human. The mask came away in his hands. She set it aside and looked at the face beneath. Danny's eyes were squeezed shut against the pane. His face was pale, almost gray, marked with scars where the metal had bonded with his flesh. His lips were cracked and colorless. He looked like someone who had been buried alive and just dug his way out of the grave. But he was free. The mask was off. He was Danny Cole again. He opened his eyes. They were blue, she saw, bright blue like the ocean she had seen in pictures of Earth. They filled with tears as he looked at her, as he saw another face looking back at him without metal in the way. He tried to speak. His voice came out as a croak, barely a whisper. 3 years of silence had damaged his vocal cords, but understood the word he was trying to say. "Thank you." The tunnel door burst open. Director stood there with 4 security guards behind him, their weapons raised. Turned to face them, putting herself between Danny and the guards. Danny tried to stand, but his legs would not hold him. He collapsed against the wall, weak as a newborn, his face bare and bleeding, and finally his own. Director looked at the scene before him, the disgraced scientist, the freed prisoner, the discarded mask on the ground. His voice was calm and cold when he spoke. He sentenced them both to public execution at dawn. They put Danny in separate cells in the detention block. The cells were small and cold, with metal walls and no windows. A faint light came from a panel in the ceiling that never turned off. Danny sat on the floor with his back against the wall, still too weak to stand for long. His face hurt. Every nerve ending screamed with the memory of the mask's removal. The wounds where the metal had torn away were covered with simple bandages that a guard had applied without gentleness. But beneath the pain, Danny felt something he had almost forgotten how to recognize. He felt alive. For 3 years the mask had dulled everything. Colors had seemed gray. Sounds had seemed distant. Emotions had been crushed before they could fully form. Now the world came rushing back in full force. The cold of the floor against his legs, the stale taste of recycled air on his tongue, the fear coiling in his stomach, and the strange warmth of gratitude in his chest. He touched his own face with trembling fingers. He felt the shape of his nose, the curve of his jaw, the roughness of stubble growing after years of being sealed away. He felt the scars where the mask had lived, ridges of damaged tissue that would never fully heal. But they were his scars now. His face. His. Danny tried to speak again. His voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. He kept trying. He said his own name over and over, teaching his throat to remember how to make sounds. Danny Cole, Danny Cole, Danny Cole. In her cell a few doors away, sat in silence. She did not regret what she had done. She regretted only that they had been caught, that Danny would die in the morning instead of living free. She had wanted to give him years. She had given him only hours. But those hours mattered. She had seen his eyes when the mask came off. She had seen the tears rolling down his cheeks. She had seen a human being returned to himself after years of imprisonment. That moment was worth her life. The night cycle passed slowly. Danny drifted in and out of sleep, his body exhausted from the trauma of the removal. In his dreams he saw Earth, the planet he had been born on and left as a young man looking for work among the stars. He saw green fields and blue sky and faces of people he had once loved. The dreams were painful because they reminded him of everything he had lost, but they were also precious because he could dream at all. He woke to the sound of footsteps in the corridor, guards coming to prepare them for execution. Danny pulled himself to his feet, leaning against the wall for support. His legs shook but held. He would walk to his death standing up. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him crawl. But before the guards reached his cell, something else happened. A group of workers passed through the corridor, being led to the early shift in the tunnels. Masked workers, their metal faces blank and identical. They walked in single file as they always did, silent and empty. One of them turned his head as he passed Danny's cell. Just a small motion, barely noticeable. But Danny saw it. The worker saw him, saw his bare face, saw the scars and the wounds and the tears that still marked his cheeks. The masked worker stopped walking. The guards shouted at him to keep moving. He did not move. He stood there, his metal face pointed at Danny, and something happened beneath that mask. Something the suppression systems could not fully control. His hands went up to his own face. His fingers curled around the edges of the mask, and he began to pull. The neural feedback hit him immediately. His body jerked and spasmed as the mask punished him for unauthorized action. He fell to the ground, convulsing, but his hands never stopped pulling. Other guards rushed forward to restrain him, but by then it was too late. Another masked worker had stopped, and another. They had seen Danny's face and something had awakened in them. The thing the consortium thought they had killed, the spark of humanity that no machine could fully extinguish. One by one, the masked workers began tearing at their own prisons. Some of them died from the neural feedback. Their bodies could not survive the sudden flood of suppressed sensation. They fell and did not rise again. But others survived. They screamed as the masks came away, screamed with pain and rage and joy mixed together. They screamed because they could scream, because their voices were their own again. The guards tried to restore order. They used weapons and fists and shouted commands. But there were too many workers and not enough guards, and the workers had 3 years of buried anger finally breaking free. In her cell, heard the chaos. She heard human voices raised in fury, heard the sounds of fighting, heard the crash of bodies against metal. She understood what was happening even before her cell door opened and a human with a bleeding face appeared. It was not Danny. It was another freed worker, a woman named Lucy Park whose mask had come away during the struggle. She held a guard's in her shaking hand. "Come with me," Lucy said. Her voice was rough from disuse but fierce with determination. "We need you." Followed her through corridors filled with chaos. Freed humans fought against guards. Some still wore their masks but had stopped following orders, their suppression systems overloaded by the emotional surge spreading through them like fire. Others had torn their masks away and were helping their fellow workers do the same. They found Danny still in his cell, the door locked with a different system, used her maintenance knowledge to bypass it. The door slid open and Danny stepped out, unsteady but upright. He looked at the rebellion happening around him. He looked at the freed humans, the fallen guards, the chaos that his uncovered face had somehow sparked. He looked at with those bright blue eyes. "You did this," she said, "just by showing them your face. You reminded them what they are." Danny shook his head. His voice was still weak, still damaged, but growing stronger with each word he spoke. "No," he said, "you did this. You believed I was worth saving. You showed them we could be saved." A human could not embrace it easily. Their bodies were shaped too differently. But Danny reached out and took scaled hand in his own, and he held it tightly. Around them, the station burned with the fires of rebellion. But they were not finished yet. Director was still alive somewhere in the station, and a consortium enforcement fleet was surely on its way. The fight for freedom had only just begun. The control center fell by midday. Freed workers stormed through the doors, overwhelming the remaining guards with sheer numbers and desperate fury. Director tried to send a distress signal to the consortium fleet, but Lucy Park had already disabled the long-range communications array. She had been an engineer before they put the mask on her, and she remembered every system on the station. Danny moved through the corridors like a ghost. His body was still weak from the mask removal, and he leaned on walls and door frames to keep himself upright. But he refused to rest. He refused to hide. Everywhere he went, freed workers saw his face and something changed in their eyes. He had become a symbol without meaning to become one. He was proof that the masks could be beaten. Not everyone had survived the removal. 17 workers died from neural feedback, their bodies unable to handle the shock of sudden freedom. Another 12 had been killed by guards during the fighting. Danny saw their bodies laid out in a cargo bay, human faces finally visible in death. He wept for them. He had learned how to weep again, and he did not try to stop himself. Worked without rest. She treated the wounded, both human and the few who had surrendered rather than fight. Her medical knowledge was limited but better than nothing. She stitched wounds and administered painkillers from the station's meager supplies. She talked to the freed humans, learning their names, hearing their stories, letting them see that not all were their enemies. By evening, the station was secure. The guards were locked in the detention block. The administrative staff had surrendered peacefully, too frightened to resist. Only Director remained defiant. They found him barricaded in his office, holding a weapon he clearly did not know how to use. Danny entered the office alone. The others wanted to come with him, wanted to protect him, but he waved them back. This was something he needed to do himself. Pointed the weapon at him. His scaled hands trembled. Danny walked toward him slowly, making no sudden movements. "You cannot win," said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "The fleet will come. They will destroy this station and everyone on it. Your rebellion means nothing." Danny stopped a few feet away from the director. He looked at this being who had kept humans in chains, who had watched them suffer and die without concern, who had sentenced him to death for the crime of wanting his own face back. He felt anger, real anger, hot and sharp, unfiltered by any machine. He could have taken his weapon. He could have killed him. Part of him wanted to, the part that had been hurt and humiliated and dehumanized for 3 years. But Danny did not reach for the weapon. He reached for his collar instead. The director flinched back, but Danny was faster. He grabbed the chains of office that hung around his neck, the symbols of his rank and authority. With one sharp pull, Danny tore them away. The metal links scattered across the floor. "You exiled her," Danny said, nodding toward the door where waited. "You burned marks into her skin and took away her name. You made her nothing because she dared to see us as people." He grabbed the decorative sash that marked his administrative status and tore that away too. "Now I am doing the same to you. You are not a director anymore. You are not anything. You are exiled. You will leave this station on the next shuttle and you will never return." Stared at him with something between confusion and horror. This was not how rebels were supposed to behave. They were supposed to be savage, violent, proving everything the consortium said about lesser species. They were not supposed to show mercy. "Why?" asked. "Why not kill me? I would have killed you." Danny smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in 3 years, and the expression felt strange on his face, but it also felt right. "Because that is what makes us different," he said. "We choose who we want to be, and I choose to be better than what you made me." The guards took away to wait for his exile. Danny walked to the main viewport of the control center and looked out at the stars. Joined him there, standing close enough that he could feel the warmth of her scaled skin. "The fleet will come," she said. "He was right about that. We cannot hold this station against consortium warships." "I know," Danny said. "Then what do we do?" Danny watched the stars for a long moment before answering. Somewhere out there, other mining colonies held other masked workers. Other humans lived under control, their faces hidden, their voices silenced, their humanity suppressed. This one station was just the beginning. "We send a message," he said. "We tell everyone what happened here. We show them that the masks can be removed. We show them that we can fight back." Lucy Park approached them. She had been working on the communications array, revering the damage she had done earlier. "I can broadcast to the whole system," she said. "Maybe further. If we boost the signal through the mining relay network, every station in consortium territory will hear us." Danny nodded. He turned to face the communication console and the camera that would carry his image across the stars. He thought about what he wanted to say, what words could possibly capture what had happened here and what it meant. In the end, he kept it simple. The broadcast went out an hour later. Danny's face appeared on screens throughout the system, in mining colonies and transport ships and administrative centers. His voice, still rough but growing stronger, carried a message that could not be suppressed. "My name is Danny Cole. For 3 years they locked my face in metal. They tried to take away my voice, my feelings, my humanity. They believed I would remain that way forever." He paused and gestured for to join him in front of the camera. She is. She freed me. She risked everything to give me back my face. She proved that our species are not enemies by nature. We are made into enemies by those who profit from our division." Danny looked directly into the camera, into the eyes of every human and every watching across the stars. "They locked away my face. They thought they locked away my soul, but you cannot cage what makes us human. You can only delay it." He took a breath. The words came easier now. "To every human in chains, hear me. The masks can be removed. Freedom is possible. We proved it here and you can prove it wherever you are. Rise up. Take back your faces. Take back your lives." The broadcast ended. Danny stepped away from the console, exhausted but peaceful. Through the viewport, he could see lights approaching in the distance. The consortium fleet, coming to crush the rebellion before it could spread. Lucy looked at the approaching ships with fear in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Danny reached out and took his hand again. He looked at the freed workers gathered around him, humans and the handful of who had chosen to stand with them. He looked at their faces, and wounded and beautiful. He smiled his strange new smile. "Now we show them what we are." The fleet drew closer. The fight for freedom was far from over. But on mining station Kappa 7, 43 humans had remembered how to be human again. And across the system, in every colony and ship and city where the broadcast had reached, others were beginning to remember too. The spark that had kept alive in Danny had become a fire. And fires, once started, are very hard to put out.